Welcome to the Legendary Upside podcast. My name is Pat Kerrane. You can follow all of my content at legendaryupside.com. With me today, Liam Murphy at Chess Liam of Chaos Surfing. Liam, how's it going?
What's going on? I don't even know if I am of Chaos Surfing. I haven't made a site yet. Just had an Apple podcast. Didn't update that since last Wednesday. Got a couple on the backlog there, but happy to be here, Pat. Always like joining you and talking fantasy football and best ball with you. How you been, man?
I've been good. Yeah. I've been writing a little bit, which is always nice. I'm always happy when I can get some writing done. And we'll have an article out that won't be out by the time you listen to this, but will be out early tomorrow morning with a premium podcast feed edition as well, if you prefer to listen to it. I do want to say, just kind of housekeeping note, I've gotten some emails from people asking their subscribers saying, hey, can you send me the premium podcast link? Check to see if you got an email from transistor.fm. If you have been looking to set that up, if you didn't, email me. I can very quickly send out another one. So that's supposed to happen automatically. I did it for some people, for whatever reason, has not. So if you don't see the email, make sure that you ask me for that email. If you haven't signed up for Legendary Upside, that is one of the perks. So you can do that for $69 at legendaryupside.com/early. So getting the plug in right at the top of the pod this week. But let's dive into a conversation here, Liam, about DraftKings. I wanted to talk about some of these new tournaments that have launched. We have Ball Mania. Ball Mania is a very unique tournament right now. It's got this double payout structure. Underdogs decided to award a lot more to the regular season. Third of the prize pool going to the regular season. It's a very top-heavy payout structure in week 17. $3 million to first. It's down to $300,000 by the time you get to third. I think that really kind of sets us up for wanting to play the tournament in certain ways, but that's not our only option this summer. We can also look at some other tournaments that have got a variety of entry points. Your puppy on Underdog is going to be probably about the smallest that you'll see, but even on DraftKings, you do have a $3 20 max. You got a $4 single entry. There's a $10 tournament with a big final week that's got, I believe, $1 million first place prize. But they also launched a $44 that you can max at 150, a number of other single entry or 3 max tournaments, and some higher stakes stuff, including a 555 with 150 max, which it feels a little, that feels a lot, even for me coming up, with the tax liability, that you can write that down. Like, I don't know if I want to max 150 at 555, but you can if you want on DraftKings. So I want to get into the DraftKings tournaments because I know you were playing a ton on these last year, playing a ton on them now, and won 2 of these tournaments last year.
Yeah, and DraftKings did similar things last year. I think this year they've got a little bit more variety, but last year I really only did the $5 Millie Maker. They seem to just pick a number between $25 and $5 and make that their Millie Maker in a given year. No real rhyme or reason. It's $10 this year. And then I was on the 555 and the 2K, but I wasn't doing. It's just a lot of drafts for someone who's maxing drafters and Underdog and DraftKings, and I go to Vegas for part of the summer, so I can't draft then. So I don't know. Like I don't think I'll be like maxing the $3 and maxing the $15 and maxing this $44. But who knows? Possible I sell action and just be like, you know what? I'll sit there for a day and just rip a ton of teams. It's pretty like auto for me on DraftKings somewhat. But it's a different world on DraftKings. I also think it's a little bit of a different world right now on DraftKings than we've ever seen before. In that doesn't feel like a ton of casuals over there. I've been doing some 555s when they launch off. I've done like 10 to 12 of the $10, and there are way different things, but also it just seems like more of a plugged in player pool at this point in the season.
That's to be expected, I think. If you're drafting on DraftKings, you can expect some more casual drafters there who aren't maybe casual is the wrong word, but it's not going to be as heavily
not a grinder.
Well, grinder, but maybe it's just not like the same exact bubble. It's probably not people in our sort of Twitter bubbles to the same extent. There's gonna be some people, but you know, there's like the high volume FFPC drafters generally, especially like 3 or 4 years ago in particular, think about fantasy football fairly differently than the way you and I tend to. But they still grind. They're still putting in the work year round. So it's like a different. There's some sort of different philosophical leanings, I think, over on DraftKings compared to Underdog. Even though DraftKings is a PPR site, it tends to be a little less wide receiver heavy. It tends to be even more quarterback heavy, which is both of those are the opposite of what you would expect given the way the scoring works, right? Because in half PPR, quarterback has a chance to be a bigger portion of your overall points, even though you do have bonuses and stuff on DraftKings. It's still kind of interesting that actually quarterback is you can get locked out of quarterback on DraftKings in a way that you can't.
Yeah,
on
even
Underdog,
in a
really.
5-5-5, especially if you're in there with an auto drafter. For those who don't know, there's some like inside baseball you just kind of need to know about the sites. And inside baseball, auto drafters on DraftKings get 4 quarterbacks, period. So you're in there with 3 auto drafters. That could be 12 quarterbacks. And those quarterbacks could be Josh Allen, Justin Fields, Joe Burrow, all on the same team, and Deshaun Watson. It's like now there's 4 quarterbacks that people actually feel comfortable about too. Like I was in the 5-5-5. I kind of got locked. I kind of gambled, was hoping I could get like a Sam Howell as a third or Will Levis, and even they got sniped by me. And so I ended up with Daniel Jones and CJ Stroud. And can that still work in a small field? Yeah, but it's like, man, really wish I got a third there. And you're right, it is easy to get locked at quarterback. Ultimately, we need to adjust the site. Like, I think some years I was like too stubborn and was like, no, the quarterbacks are wrongly priced. Like, I'm gonna get them where I want them. And it's like, no, if you're going to get locked out, you got to get them. And I also think it makes elite quarterback a little bit more viable on DraftKings because if every quarterback's more expensive, why not
You
lock
might
in
as
a
well get the
stud?
elite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And one of the tournaments on DraftKings has about the biggest final that of anything I'll probably play in this year. The $10 million to first. The week 17
1,400
final is 1,400. Yeah. Um,
nearly.
yeah.
I mean, that's outrageous. Like to me, like that's not, I think it's so hard to win that because I don't know. It feels it is easier to reach a final than do well in it. And when the final gets too big, it's like if you even make week 17, I said this on another pod, it's like, are you even telling your friends that you have a sweat for a milli? Because like, do you?
Just do you?
Like
Yeah.
you're like
It's
1 in
1,000.
1,400.
Yeah, 1,364. So it's 1,400. Um, I do think so. When you think about DFS, right? If you had, let's say, a 50 team field, you could probably win without having one of the elite quarterbacks, because you might like your quarterback could end up scoring like not that many points and you'd still be fine. Right. So, but once you get up, and then it kind of goes the same way again, like once you get up to like milli maker stuff, if you can find a quarterback who goes off for an amazing week at super low cost, or maybe not super low, but not an elite quarterback cost, then that's going to be a huge edge. And there's so many teams in the field that maybe someone happens to have that guy with the right combos. But this actually still is, it's not exactly like a small field, but I would say it's like a medium field. This is smaller than the smaller SPY, which is a $100 single entry tournament on DraftKings, generally talked about. Like, I play the SPY, Pete Overzet plays the SPY. Like, those aren't lotteries in DFS. And in fact, the bigger of the two SPYs, I think, is like 5,555. The smaller is in the 2,000 range. So this is still smaller than that. And my thinking is you're probably going to want an elite quarterback. One of the elite quarterbacks is going off in a big tournament. Like, there's going to be enough teams in this tournament where someone's going to have a ton of points at quarterback and the right guys with him.
Yeah, and I mean that always makes sense in theory for me for any site, any final size. But can Daniel Jones drop 30? Can Tom Brady drop 30 in a week? Yes,
For sure. Yeah.
and I think this is an interesting year at quarterback specifically because the late round guys aren't all Mac Jones. Some of them have some rushing ability. It's just uncertainty of who is playing, with some of these
Right.
guys. Like, is it Brissett or is it Sam Howell? If, Sam Howell could be 85% Justin Fields or something, a poor man's version with better pass weapons. So, there's guys like that. Trey Lance, we don't know if he's going to play. Obviously, Richardson, more expensive. Will Levis. Does Will Levis run? I don't really know. He's a big dude. Like, you
He'll
get him
run a
out
little.
there.
I don't think he's a good enough passer not to run at all.
And
So
maybe
he'll run some.
their pass game weapons are so bad he has to do a bunch of 8-yard runs.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I've not been particularly high on Howell, but I took him in one of these, one of the $10 because I got, like you were describing, getting locked out. I got locked out, and I was just like, I guess I'm drafting Howell as my quarterback 3 because it's getting real gross. I think I had like Bryce Young. Bryce Young was my best quarterback. I think I had Bryce Young, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Sam Howell. So it's probably bad.
I like Howell the most from an upside. Like, if I know all 3 of them are playing in a game, it's probably I'd take Howell, right? Obviously, he'd be like the chalk quarterback on DK that week at like 5K, who's like going to give you 20.
And that's where one of the things maybe to think about with DK is we get, a final size that's like 3 times as big as the Best Ball Mania final this year. Thinking more about like the weekly payoff on some of those quarterbacks. So I don't like taking Sam Howell and Trey Lance and stuff because I'm like, I'm probably not advancing these guys anyway. Like, who knows how many starts I'm even getting from either of these guys, and what's my payoff really? And at least on DraftKings with 20 rounds and the big field size, it's like, well, the payoff could actually be pretty big because you have this low owned guy, and you just happen to have the right combos in a big field.
But these guys get drafted, right? So it's not like they're.
That's true. But I mean, low owned in the sense that, like, I think that you're not gonna. Well, I guess it's possible, but it's not particularly likely that Howell and Lance are in the finals at a high rate.
Season, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, ultimately with like the $10, like, I think we need to separate these tournaments. Like the $10 DK Millie Maker, I don't waste my time thinking about too much. I draft my teams. The truth is, everyone who goes from like Underdog to DraftKings, for example, feels like they're making super teams. And I've made this point a lot where if everyone feels like you're making a super team, A, you're not, and B, if it requires you to enter a draft where you land with the dude who takes Brian Hoyer in round 1 and the dude who takes Tom Brady in round 1, aka what that really means is like getting unique combos of first, second, and third round players, and they score well in week 17. If that's what it takes to win, you can't really plan for that other than like drafting later in the year, maybe later at night. And so versus a site like Underdog, which some people think it's like, oh, there's sharper drafters there, it's harder to win. It's like, maybe not, because at least you don't have to plan for something you can't plan for, right? In the $10 Millie Maker. So like, draft your teams. I think what we're saying is edges to think about, but I don't really know how to optimize for the $10 DK Millie Maker. I mean, the team that won it last year was so bad. Not that that's predictive at all. And
it was interesting. Yeah. It didn't really, it had Russell Wilson single stack and then the Eagles stacked without the quarterback, which it's kind of interesting.
It clearly like barely limped into the finals.
Yeah, it was not a well-constructed team. It's not a team I would recommend taking a ton of lessons from.
No, and I mean, it's not crazy that a bad team makes the finals because it's best of 12, right? So in the first round, in the quarterfinals, you could be with a bunch of dead teams, right? And then the semifinals, maybe you just get like there's like a group that just has all bad teams in it, and you just get stuck with a bunch of those guys, and now you're in the final, and it's like wheels up, let's go. And then it's like, okay,
then it's really like wheels up, let's go.
Then it's like, okay, then what we're saying is important. Like, yes, you want to the week 17 correlation, and just really the final size is just so outrageous. It's like, just for anyone who's unfamiliar, I won, I think, around 160 person final for $1 million, and that felt big. Like going into
Yeah.
the weekend,
Yeah.
it was like, this would be cool, but like it's probably not happening, right?
Right.
10 times the size almost,
Well,
nearly.
even 4 times the size. I was on your show
Yeah.
the week before Best Ball Mania 3, and I was like, I mean, it's nice that I have this ticket, but
Yeah, you won around
470 teams.
450 people.
Yeah.
And now I don't know. It's like, I'm not a bit, I would have rather seen something like 16 people advance, or one out of 16, 1 out of 16, and then a manageable final size. But that's just me, because like, I think the act of thinking through how do we make the finals, it is just is easier, and it feels like, it just doesn't feel as live when you make it there. But hey, if
Right.
I can take, if I or anyone can take down a 1,400 person week 17 final on DraftKings for $10, let's go.
Well, let's talk the $44 tournament then,
Sure,
because that one is a 30-seat final. And
that's
this is kind
awesome.
of yeah. And this is like a nice, um, you know, it's almost twice as much as a BBM ticket, but it's not like, you know, it's some of these, even the 250 or whatever, like, or the FFPC ones that are 125, or DraftKings has a $100 3 max. $44 is like, you could still rip off a fair amount. Maybe you're not maxing, but you can still get down like a portfolio.
Yeah, and
Um,
and people like looking to do $100 into best ball. This is probably a great tournament to do your 4 teams in for the year or whatever. 3 to 4 teams, because I think what DraftKings is doing well is, they're giving us a lot of variety. If these tournaments fill, there's going to be more.
mhm.
They have a bigger client base, right? And then their payouts are a lot more flatter. Like in that $44, 200K to first, 100K to second, roughly like 25K increments to 10K increments down. You get $2,500 if you make it to the finals. It's like, that's pretty nice. You get more for making the $44 final than you do Best Ball Mania 4, I believe. Like, isn't that like a 1K min cash or something?
I think it might be a 1K. I can
Yeah.
pull it up.
So it it seems like they are making their tournaments a little bit more flatter in payouts in some ways. Like, I don't know. It's hard to think about their $10 tournament because the final size is just so big, but I'm a fan of what they're doing, and I think it's good for the best ball space to have more websites releasing more tournaments. And I don't know, like I put a tweet out there that there is 1 year in best ball, could be this year, could be whatever, but there could be significant overlays in many tournaments just due to all the sites competing. So it's like, could be a golden year from the consumer side, where it's like, wow, I got all these like overlay tournaments. And it shouldn't really hurt growth too much, even if they don't fill, because it's going to get bigger, like
Right, right.
they're okay eating some overlay.
Yeah, I mean, Best Ball Mania 1 had overlay. I was listening to Rudman on, I believe, the Take Casts, talking about that, which I had forgotten, but they like knew at the time that it would, and that was like part of the overall strategy. So
That's what Drafters does too. Drafters overlaid last year. I talked to the guy who runs the site. He said he thinks he's lucky if he gets to 70%. That's the plan.
okay, well, that's a reason to be playing on drafters. Maybe let's circle back to drafters if we have time at the end,
Sure,
because
yeah.
that's pretty interesting. So if you're looking at some of these tournaments, and let's say let's say you were gonna max BBM, so you're gonna get like roughly $4,000 down on best ball this year.
Which what percent do we think does that? Like, I would guess that's like 1% of the field.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe let's take that down. Let's say you're gonna do $1,000 on best ball this year.
Even that, like 500 is probably, like, for a lot of people, like a pretty. I have no gauge. Like,
Let's
I
say a
don't know.
thousand so that we can, because it's
Nice
nice and
even
round.
number.
It can
Okay.
we can move it up and we can move it down very easily.
Okay.
Um, and it also it's easy to do percentages of, because it's divisible by 100 or whatever. So your
Math.
yeah, math. Let's set ourselves up for some easy math. If you've got $1,000 bankroll, then like what of these DraftKings tournaments are jumping out to you? Because there are some interesting options. Like there's a $250 dollar with $250K prize pool tournament that is a single entry. So it's $250 to enter. It is a single entry tournament. It pays $50,000 up top, $35,000 to second, $2,000 to the last place finisher in the final, which is 10th place. It's only a 10-seat final. It's a top 2 advance out of 12, top 2 advance out of 6, top 1 advances out of 6. So this is a much more forgiving advance rate structure. You've talked about some of how like these forgiving advance rates can set up the casual player for some pain because maybe they're going up against a bunch of like maybe the final seat contains several tickets from, you know, a few different sharps. But this isn't going to be that. It's a single entry. So
And
like would this
it's
be
10 people in the final. So
it's 10 people in the final. So like if you had $1,000 to spend on best ball this year, would you be looking to burn as much, you know, as a quarter of it on one tournament?
Are we just talking about DraftKings
No,
allocation?
you've got $1,000 to spend on best ball, period.
So I think this comes down to, and I kind of put a thread out on like contest selection with the idea. This comes down to like, what do you want out of best ball? And it's good for people to be honest with themselves, right? Obviously anyone can win anything, even if you're in it for mostly entertainment. And what do I mean by entertainment? It's like you watch football almost every Sunday, maybe Monday nights too, maybe Thursday nights, and you know DFS isn't good for you. Maybe you have bad impulse control or whatever, and like you've just lost at DFS. It's raked too quickly. Maybe you're just not into that. So what you like to do is you like to watch the games, you like to pull up your best ball teams, and you like to get a sweat. And you need to decide what's your strategy. Do you want to do a lot of lottery teams and have a lot of teams to sweat, and your risk of ruin, aka the chance you get no money back, is pretty low, but your chance of getting a positive ROI if you do a lot of these lotteries, the $10 DraftKings one, the Ball Mania IV, is also not so great, right? Like it's just mathematically hard to turn an expectation, even if you are theoretically plus EV drafter. So if you're looking for that, I would stick to the lotteries, right? If your goal is like, no, I want to turn $1,000 into 2,000 or $1,000 into 5,000. You think you're a good drafter. It's like, yeah, I would take some of these tournaments. I would still do, maybe $1,000. Let's do 4 Best Ball Mania 4s. Let's do 10 DraftKings $10. So we got $200 allocated to those. So we still have a sweat, right? Or if you like really enjoy drafting, right? Maybe you do more puppies. Like you like to fire up a Pete Overzet stream or Pat stream or a me stream or whoever out there, and you like to draft along, but the whatever tournament we're drafting is too much. So just enter a puppy, draft along, listen. You're doing multi there. But yeah, I would consider like these $250 single entry. I think is a great one that I would fire at and just be like, if I make the finals, I know I'm getting, you can't see this on the phone, so I got to pull this up. If you're able to make the finals,
you get $2,000.
$2,000, so almost 10x. You got a chance at 50K, which is like for almost everyone playing best ball out there is like a really great year. Like that's like a year salary basically right there.
If you finish 4th to 6th in the semifinals, then and again these are 16 pods, you get $600.
Also great, right? Like
also
that's
pretty great, yeah.
That keeps you afloat for the next year. Just like keep that on the account and do it next year.
To make the semifinals again, you had to finish top 2 in a 12-team league, and then top 2 in a 6-person pod. So it's actually, to get to the semifinals, you just have to finish top 2 in a 6-person pod. So it's not like that hard to make the semifinals. And then if you finish last in that semifinals, you still get 600.
Basically,
even if you finish,
you have twice the odds of advancing out of the quarterfinals than you do out of the regular season, right? Because regular seasons,
It's going to be more variant because it's just that
1 out
one
of
week.
6.
Yeah, but yeah, you
But
you
no,
can
just pure math and not taking into
right,
account how
right.
good the teams are
How
you're
good the team
playing.
is. Yeah,
Because one theory is you're facing a lot of super teams. Obviously, they advanced, but you're also going to be facing some teams with some dead roster spots.
for sure.
So it's like, what are you searching for? Do you want more gentle do you want more like harsh advance rates where it's like 1 out of 40 advance? Are you okay with huge final sizes? Are you is just getting to the final like what you feel good about, and then you don't really, then it's like you just leave it
Is
up
the
to the
top
variance
prize what you're
gods?
shooting for? Because
Because
this one
yes.
it pays out 50K, which is awesome, but it's not 3 million. It's not 1 million.
No, and like Underdog, for example, though, like their tournament would be like top. Some of their high stakes stuff is 4 out of 12 advance, so you're more likely to make money, right? Any money. So you're gonna make like, I don't know, barely any money when you're 4 out of 12, and then it's something like 4 out of 12 advance to the it's these, and then it's like 100-person final with 100K up top for like a high stakes buy-in, and it's like the problem with that is if you're only doing a couple entries, is you think like, oh, I'm going to make more money more often because of this. But the chance that if I max that tournament and I have how are you going to feel if you see 30 Chess Liam teams in the week 17 final out of the 100 entrants, or 30 Peter Jennings teams, or if like 30 Pat teams? Like, are you going to be like, what the hell? Like, because that's
Right.
far more likely on a site like Underdog than on a site like DraftKings. Although it can happen in DraftKings small field too, obviously not single entry, where if someone has a narrow player pool and they just hit the nuts, like the year before I won, I believe one dude had like 4 entrants in the 555 finals for 250K out of like 12 or something, right? Like
Wow.
he had a narrow player pool, hit it, and got a great ROI just because he got a bunch of teams to the finals. He didn't win. He got like 2nd, 3rd, and 5th and 6th or something like that. But obviously a great effing year, right?
Still a good year. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, not financial advice. You do whatever you want with your
No,
$1,000.
none of
But
this is financial advice. Obviously do what you want and know yourself. Like some
yeah,
people, when they open the draft waters, are like physically not going to be able to slow, right? So it's like, okay, find the cheapest, smallest tournaments, then find a way to space it out, find a way to do something else, find a way to just chill, you know.
let me just get a sense of like your mindset on this stuff. Let's say I say, Liam, look, um, I'm gonna open this up. It's now 2 max. This $250 that we covered. It's now 2 max, and you can either get 2 tickets for that or 1 555, which pays out, which is a 29-person final, pays out $1 million to first, 150,750 to second, 100,000 to third. That's $10,000 minimum if you make the final. It is harder to make the final. It's 2 of 12, 1 of 6, then only 1 of 5. So the semifinals are easier, but it's twice as hard to get there in week 15. Then a 29-seat final round. Does that appeal to you more? It sounds like not. It sounds like you prefer the flatter kind of final. Although these are similar finals. Number of
I
people in
mean,
the
are you
final.
talking
So
about me specifically? Like,
yeah, would
I'm
you
gonna
rather 2 shots at a kind of like medium tournament, or 1 shot at a giant payday
I
tournament?
think in a year, because I have 300K in earnings for best ball this year.
Right.
So,
Not you, not you, not Liam's. This is a
sure.
different
For the
person.
average person, I think they should do the $250 one. And you're just going to, rather than the 555, just because the 555 this year is very outrageously top heavy. I think it's like pretty much a marketing expense for high stakes users where, I don't know, there's 5.2K entrants. I would guess 3,800 entrants would be like a good number. And, if you get that mill, we have to mention that any $1 million prize on DraftKings also gives you that Tournament of Champions ticket. I think it's valued roughly like 30K or something like that. That's a nice little bonus, man, where you can win another mil with your
Right.
Tournaments of Champion ticket. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be firing at the
You said
555.
250, but your eyes say the 5. You're doing
Well,
the
you know me.
555.
I am a dreamer, Pat. Like, I've
Yeah.
played Millie Makers all my life. That is what I am, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. But also, like many times in my life, 50K would have been, I viewed 50K and like a million as like similar things, which is like, it's just winning, right? It's just like you're winning a lot of money, right? And it's like, and you win 50K, you can play best ball the rest of your life if you do it right. Obviously, if you take that money and take care of bills and stuff, then you can't, which you should. But I don't know. Like I like the top heavy prizes. Just trying to hit that bullseye, but and it lets you kind of like maybe build to my strengths too, where it's like you can do some weird shit, and it's like it's not actually that bad because second place is losing, you know. Um,
Right.
like and just for people like $1 million to first, 150K to second, almost 10% of what first, like that's just outrageous for a any tournament,
It
of
is
like
outrageous, and
of
it's
skill.
particularly jarring in one of the high stakes tournaments, which you think would maybe kind of be flatter, but it's
Well,
actually
so
even
last year
more.
it was 250K, 125K to second, I think like 70K to third. So so they're
Mm-hmm.
cutting it by 50%. This year they're kind of doing that too, but they're just doing it from second place down,
Right.
right? So like the first prize is just like, look, here's a mil high stakes, and like I would rather do something like the 555 than the FFPC main event, which has higher rake.
You have to
And
manage the teams.
like, would you want to do four? Would you like to do four 555 entrants or one main event? That also depends on a camaraderie thing, working with
Right.
someone else if you're splitting the team versus do you like the idea of managing, setting waivers every Wednesday night? Is that enjoyable to you or
Well, or
not?
it can be an edge as well, so you got to think:
Is
is
that
it
an edge
something?
of
Is it a
yours?
pain point or is it an edge? So
It's both.
it's both.
But I don't know. What are you thinking about? I mean, what do you think I think most people, like I just wish we could get numbers from a site like Underdog. I understand why they don't want to release them. It's probably mostly for like competitor reasons, nothing, and investor reasons, nothing to do with protecting consumer information. But like, I don't know. It wouldn't be surprising if like 90% do $300 and below in best ball in a year, and then 10%. But I don't know. Like in the Twitter bubble, it seems like a lot of these guys are like maxing these puppies, that's $750, right? So,
Well, I'd also
um,
say like it is still May, and so if you're listening to this, like I think you're probably more likely to be, not just kind of firing a few teams as an afterthought. And I think that there is a big portion of people playing best ball that will do that, but they'll probably do it at the same time they're drafting their home leagues. They'll probably do it more in August and September. Um, and yeah, I mean, it doesn't. But I think what's nice about best ball right now is that like there do seem to be a lot of offerings. It really doesn't matter kind of what your bankroll is. You can find something that's going to match with that pretty nicely. And then also, what I like about some of these different payouts is that like if you have enough where you're going to do like not max, but do a handful of something in the $25 to $50 entry range, you can either go over to BBM, which is like a big time lotto, 3 million to first, drops to 300,000 by third. It's not. It's a spot where you're playing for first. You're playing for first. If you're in this in this $44 tournament, it's almost twice as much an entry, but at least like you can look at taking down something with an okay, $200,000 payout that drops to 75,000 by third, min 2,500. So yeah, and I checked the BBM4 is min 1,000. So there are kind of
The
what's your
the
bankroll? You can dial up and down, but you can also dial up and down what your goal and expectation and the type of sweat you want to be going for.
so the first year I played best ball, I was a teacher at the time, and that this was during COVID, and then I was also working. Once COVID hit and like I was a chess teacher, they pretty much canceled chess. I was like calling on kids' math homework. So I started to do some remote work for chess.com at the same time. And it was like 1099 work. I was a contractor. So I don't know, maybe I made like 5K between like 7,500 with all the chess.com work. And what did I do? When I moved back to St. Pete, I put that pretty much all into best ball because I discovered best ball. And at the time I remember thinking, I was like, man, everyone's probably like so good. Like they're probably like all these like big sharks in the water. So I remember I got in a lobby with like Peter Jennings, and like I still have it in my Excel sheet, like comparing my team drafted to CSU Ram 88, who I didn't even really like know at the time. But anyways, what did I do that year? DraftKings had different tournaments. I think I did 40 in their $20 or $10 milli maker. So between like 800 to 400 bucks there. I did $2,000 worth in their 333. So around 8 entrants in their 333. And I did 2 entrants in their 1Ks. They had a 1K back then. And I ended up making the finals or the playoffs in both of my 1Ks, which was like big for me, right? And then also in like 5 out of 8 of the 333s. But I didn't make any. I don't know if I even made a semifinals or didn't make a finals or anything that year, but that's roughly what I did. But I had that extra income. I didn't have a family, so I was able, but that's how I budgeted. I didn't max the Billy Maker. I didn't I shot took the 1K, I shot took the 333, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and so like
Yeah.
that's how I like to, and I think that's your greatest chance at earning 50K, 100K is to shot take some of these higher stakes buy-ins. Not financial advice, obviously, and you got to ask like, how bad will it hurt you to get $0 back? Is that going to put you in financial stress? Well, then stick to a puppy or a Pomeranian or something like that, where it's not going to hurt you financially as much if you lose, which
It
you
is
will
an
most
interesting
years.
thing because the shot taking stuff, you're more likely to get $0 back, but you're also way more likely to get something meaningful. So it's kind of the lotteries are like you are more likely to get some money back because some of your team, especially with they're paying out money for the regular season, you can get, you're going to advance probably 25 your teams, you get some prizes in the playoffs. It's not going to be zero if you max. I mean, it could be, but it's unlikely to be zero in a max enter situation with like BBM4. But it could easily be zero. You could put, however many entries down in the 555 and you get $0 back. That's like a
Yeah,
plausible outcome.
I will just say, like, the poker industry, I think, is a little bit of a parallel to best ball, more so than DFS. And a lot of people who came up through poker shot took at points. Now, that is survivorship bias, right? It's like, you shot took and you did well. There's also 9 other dudes who shot took and had to go back down in stakes and work their way back up, and maybe are out of the game and got a real job. So it's like, I don't know. It was a natural thing for me to shot take. But ask yourself, and like, if I don't know, if you just stumbled upon Pat's podcast here and you don't play best ball, probably do
Don't
not
shot
fire
take.
at the high stakes,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
this is a year for you to play in the puppy
Well, there's
or
lots
take.
of great options too to get your feet wet with stuff. And one reason I wanted to talk about some of the DraftKings stuff, the puppy would be on Underdog would be a good one, but like, there's a
You like these
$9.
ones better?
Well, I don't like them better necessarily or worse, but it's just like I'm just kind of
Oh,
intrigued by the differences. And like there's a $9 three max that pays out 10K to first. And that's that is top 2 of 12, top 2 of 12, top 1 of 12, 30-seat final. $500 min for finishing last in the final. That's pretty interesting.
It is. And I think we should also mention that, like, personally, the drafting experience in Underdog is around 200 times more pleasant for me than a site
It's
like
so much better.
DraftKings,
So
because I am a visual person and I like to see the draft board. I like to know when the dude on the turn took 4 quarterbacks, and I don't want to have to click into each team. So, like, I literally don't enjoy doing these $10 milli makers on DraftKings right now. If it was all I had, I think I would. But because I am doing so, I've done so many drafts at this point, I'm also getting like a little burnt out at this point. But it's like, it's okay, I'm going to have a break. But
it's May.
I know it's funny, but the point is, like, I really enjoy the 5-5-5 drafts on DraftKings because it's like a puzzle where, like, I get up for it and I'm locking in, and it's like, this is, and I am grinding and doing the work, and I go take a nice seat in nature, and it's like, let's go. But the $10 milli maker, where it's like, even if I make the finals, it's 1,400 people. It's so unlikely. It's like, God, I got to get these in because I know I'm plus EV at them, but I don't enjoy doing them. But I don't feel that way about Ball Mania 4. I literally enjoy,
No, I don't either.
Like I could fire up a TV show with my girlfriend and, like, do a draft on the side, and I'm loving it, right? Like, or I'm in the hot tub and I'm loving it. And on DraftKings, I personally, and some people like DraftKings, that is wonderful for them. They at least are showing signs of improvement where we can now see our player exposures.
You can upload the rankings now.
Really would love that draft board, but and I'm in 4 slows right now for the 5-5-5. I think it's all I'm going to do. I just wanted to get some early exposure to the ADPs, but I burnt myself in some drafts because I was hoping, like, the people were a little bit more plugged in and the ADP was so bad, or I'm like, okay, I can get that guy later. And then I realized that these dudes are, like, drafting off someone's, either your ranks or ETR's ranks or something, and they weren't sticking with, like, the in-app, which is like, sometimes players do and sometimes they don't, and it's a gamble in a given room.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go to, all right, if you're going to draft at all on DraftKings, let's dive a little bit more into, like, what some of the differences are on the site. We talked about quarterback. I'm kind of with you that the elite quarterbacks are actually kind of more interesting on DraftKings in that room because all the quarterbacks are going to go anyway. So you might as well pay up.
And you can rock single Josh Allen. You know, like, you could, if you had to, you could do that. That could win. I didn't need a second quarterback to win 2 best ball tournaments, right? Like, yeah. I would have advanced. I would have advanced out of, like, it was just the elite guys carrying me there. Like, literally, I had Justin Fields that with Josh Allen one year, and he was a 0 the whole year.
Yeah, that is interesting. And certainly the quarterback prices, because, like, that's one thing with DraftKings I've noticed is, like, you get that kind of Stafford tier on Underdog where it's like, well, I can always come back and get Jordan Love and Stafford. Like, no. Those guys are going earlier than you feel comfortable taking them as well. So, like, when you're like, I really need a 3rd or 4th running back here, like, I've pushed it, I need to make sure I'm not locked out at running back. That's when those quarterbacks get snapped up. So that's probably, like, one of the biggest differences. One thing, though, it's kind of interesting with DraftKings. So I'm kind of the mindset that the Underdog ADP, although it's, like, maybe a little bit bananas for people who aren't used to wide receiver heavy draft rooms, it is hard to counter that wide receiver heavy room on Underdog. Like, to some extent, you have to go with the market. You can't zig. It. Yeah, you can't zig, which I actually think makes it more efficient. If it sort of forces, at a certain point, if it forces everyone's hands, they can't counter you with a contrarian strategy, then I think it means it's efficient to some degree. It's not perfectly efficient, but on DraftKings, it isn't that way as much. And as a result, I sometimes find myself breaking ties toward the running back on DraftKings because I'm like, I'll find wide receiver value in this room later. And again, we moved from a half PPR to a PPR site, and I'm breaking ties toward running back. It's a little counterintuitive.
But like the top running backs also are more valuable on PPR sites, right? Like CMC is better on a full PPR site, so is probably Jahmyr Gibbs. So it's different year to year. What I'm feeling right now is the top, like, other than the fact that, like, I don't know, Garrett Wilson and Jalen Waddle are swapped with some dudes in the second round. The first 3 rounds are like pretty normal, but really where the guys are more expensive is like Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Swift. Like, these guys are all more expensive, and to me, they're guys I also don't really love drafting anyway. So I'm like, ugh,
Right.
and like JSN is like way more cheaper. So like Odell for some reason is like the love of DraftKings,
I don't
where
understand it. Yeah.
he's like in the 80s. I'm like, okay, I just won't end up with any Odell on DraftKings. Like, that's okay, because I view my portfolio across all the sites a little bit, and I'm okay getting my exposure on different sites based on cost. Now, that's not the perfect way to think about it, I think, in best ball, because if a guy can hit a ceiling in week 17, really, for playoff format weeks, you should just get that guy and don't care about the cost. But I think what you said makes sense. Like, and I think I've been bad on DraftKings some years because I fought the thing with the running back. Like, maybe I'll take like one hero running back, and then I'll just end up with like 7 handcuffs. And some years that's actually going to be the nuts. Like, some years Josh Jacobs gets hurt and Ramondre gets hurt and Tony Pollard gets hurt, and I have all these guys, and people are like, where the fuck did this team come from? But most years I have a bunch of zeros and like whoever I took up top, right? But I have all this wide receiver firepower, I have all this quarterback firepower, hopefully tight end firepower. I would lie if I said I was like super plugged into the DraftKings ADP right now, just because I'm up at around like 50 Best Ball Manias and like 10 DraftKings, which I did 8 of those on the first day. So I'm in the 555 slows, so I'm like feeling it, but I don't really like ADP shifting. A lot of like the late guys are wildly priced differently, where it would be interesting to, I would guess Underdog is more like, if we come out here and touted a player, like if I shouted from my lungs that, like, I don't know, Devin Singletary was the best pick in best ball, he could jump around on Underdog. I don't think that happens on DraftKings. So it's like,
No.
it is interesting to see which site is more tout dependent,
Or at least more interested in what we have to say.
Well, that's what I mean by that. Like,
well, but I mean, I wonder if DraftKings, if there's people could probably move the DraftKings market, but it just wouldn't be you and me.
Well, I literally don't know who in the fantasy space could, like Matthew Berry maybe, but like I don't know who these DraftKings drafters are. Like, are these frat bros? Are these plugged in guys?
We might need to bring Fantasyland back, and Pete and I can investigate who's drafting on DraftKings, because it is a mystery to me. Like, because there's
turn on a webcam. Let's see inside these houses.
Well, you kind of mentioned something there I thought was interesting. Managing your exposure across the different sites, like how much of, and yeah, you don't want to go completely nuts with that, but I think it is an interesting idea. How much of that are you thinking about? Like, this guy is priced much more cheaply on DraftKings, or he's a better fit for the format, or what have you. Like, how comfortable are you being like, I'm basically fading this guy on Underdog, but I'm getting to an overall level of portfolio exposure because I'm drafting him on DraftKings or Drafters or whatever?
That's changed over time for me because, like Cooper Kupp, the year he broke out, like really broke out for Best Ball Mania 2, I was drafting him more on DraftKings because it was like, slot guy, probably better on PPR site. And it's like, oh no, actually the NFL kind of changed, and like these slot, engines of the offense are a thing, and I missed out on this like legendary season. But whereas like a guy like Cole Beasley, like that type of slot dude who's like not Cooper Kupp, it's like, why are you drafting
Hunter Renfrow?
Yeah, why are you drafting? Yeah. But I don't know. Hunter Renfrow had a 200-point season on Underdog.
That's true.
Like, the Hunter Renfrow enigma, I don't even know how to handle with Jacoby Myers there and the tight end competing. But that changes over time for me. And I mostly, like, if I think a player is really bad priced on DraftKings, I'm just like, easy fade for me. But if I like the player and I just don't love that he's more expensive and I don't think he's going to get cheaper, I'm going to still take him some because it doesn't matter what I think the cost should be of the player. If I like the player, I like the player for a reason. And, I don't know. It's just like I'm reevaluating I think the risers are interesting too, like the Ramondres who climb rounds and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
the Daryl Hendersons who climb rounds. And like a Daryl Henderson was a fade for me. I also faded kind of Ramondre once he climbed, and it's like maybe he climbed for a reason, right? So it's
Right.
like it's that hard balance of like, are there super teams with this guy already versus maybe they just had like Chase Brown could be out of thought by August, right? Like there's a lot of guys being drafted right now who we just kind of decide are like handcuffs who the
Right.
NFL may not.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely true. One thing I noticed last year is that like, and this I think Sky Moore was probably the guy I was doing it with the most, but he rose a ton on Underdog,
So
and
like
then
the
that
wrong site, right?
right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, we're all looking for the guys that did this. And then he did not rise as much on DraftKings. And that's maybe one thing I do want to think about more this year is like, hey, if you're going to eat it real hard on a rookie wide receiver, at least have it be at really good prices. So, you got the double digit round Sky Moore when it was available on Underdog, then it stopped being available, and you went and got more of Sky Moore on DraftKings where it was still available. That's fine. What I did, where I just was like taking him still in the single digit rounds, not as great,
I
So
did get my exposure on DraftKings with him because like him, and I can't really remember who else. Like there's some like really outrageously priced players on DraftKings, I thought. Um but yeah, like he was a guy who I was like, this is a clear ship chasing supercharged player, right? Like that's just what it was. It was like it was the fate of like you liking the name and then landed on a
I
good
like
landing
I like the
slot.
player too, not just
You
the
like the player, the name. Pete liked the name. Who knows? Whatever. But the point is, people were just like, "Rocket ship, let's go!" And it's like,
yeah, yeah,
and meanwhile, they were like, "Oh, that's who it was, Christian Watson." They were like, it was like the Toy Story meme, like, "I don't want to play with you anymore."
uh-huh.
Uh, and I was like, I was getting all of the Christian Watson on DraftKings. Another guy was Brees Hall, who for whatever reason was just like a 6th round pick, and I
They
was
don't
like,
like him this year either. I got him in the late third.
well,
You know,
that I think is different than him being a 6th. But people were afraid of Michael Carter, and they were like, "Oh, can't trap Brees Hall. Like it could be the Michael Carter show." And it's like, no,
yeah.
it was not the Michael Carter
I think
show.
that's probably, if you think about it, like there's a different like style of drafter that is more common on DraftKings than Underdog, you know, or another way of saying is that like the group think on Underdog is out of control, and there's some free thinkers on DraftKings. Well, those free thinkers aren't going to like, uh, you know, probably the hyped rookies, right? Jameer Gibbs maybe will be, although he is not that cheap now, but
It's
he,
hard to say how they view rookies because, like, I could see them being like if they played for the right team in college and like were on TV enough, like these guys
uh-huh.
probably watched. Like I don't watch college ball. These guys actually probably they're like, no, I saw what he did against North Dakota State. Like this dude is gonna ball in the NFL, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of and some of them are maybe talent scouts for all I know, like but
Two guys that come to mind this year for me are Marvin Mims, who I think will be a big riser on Underdog, and might not be a big riser on DraftKings, or at least rise slower and peak later. And then Jaden Reed is buried on DraftKings right now, absolutely buried. And I think you're going to see him move up. I'm not a big like Jaden Reed prospects guy, but like not terrible. And he also uh, did get drafted in the second rounds and could be a start. He should be a starter right away in the slot, and probably has a pretty good chance of displacing Romeo Dobbs in two wide receiver sets to close the year.
yeah, and
Their
that. Sorry, go ahead.
their number one wide receiver is a downfield threat who's not going to draw targets at a super high rate, and their tight end is going to be a rookie. We don't even know which one yet, but there's underneath targets could be pretty good for Jaden Reed. So if and again, he's like really cheap on DraftKings right now, even though he's still not all that expensive on Underdog. I just think he's going to be probably a riser on Underdog as like a correlation, a stack type of guy. So those would probably be my early nominees for dudes you're getting like 3 rounds later on DraftKings by August.
Yeah, Reed's a guy I talked with when you, me, and Herzig had that show. I said like Romeo Dubs kind of sucks, and I could view Reed as the 2. But then a report came out that Romeo Dobbs could be. I don't know, but anyways, the point is, what you said remains consistent year to year, where these types of rookies who maybe start getting some buzz on Underdog usually don't rise that much on DraftKings. And really, when you think about it, it should be a little bit opposite probably. Like if Jaden Reed is a slot guy, it's probably a better pick on DraftKings than Underdog.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I can't get that Christian Watson slant out of my head. Like maybe he's gonna get some slot too. Like he's not just like go routes down the field. It's also like hit him 10 yards and let him go let him go Jamar Chase it. Like
that's true. Yeah. But hey, if he's in the slot, that means 2 guys are on the outside. And it's probably Dobbs and Reed. So as long as Reed's out there, you know what I mean? As long as he's out there.
I think he's a great pick. It's a second round pick, a very Romeo Dobbs, a mid pick, not a great rookie year. Maybe he has a great sophomore year. I don't know. But the Mims one is interesting too. I think we should always draft wide receivers. They get draft capital, but it's like, I think I made a video on like trade candidates. I think the Broncos are definitely in contention to be sellers at the trade deadline. Like, couldn't you see Cortland Sutton going to be a Giant because the Giants are like, you know what? The 7 slot wide receiver team isn't working it. Like, let's give them a slot. Let's get an outside guy.
Yeah.
They don't want him. Or, like the Chiefs, not the Chiefs, but it's the Broncos to the Chiefs. But I don't know. The point is like Mims doesn't even have to like go take the job of Sutton. He could benefit from trades too.
Also, they'll play a lot of 3 wide, and Judy's probably in the slot, and Mims is kind of a natural Z.
And Jaden Reed could benefit from a trade too, because if the Packers if they're like, oh no, Jordan Love is like we need to get a new guy next year, I could see Aaron Jones being shipped out of town, which less target competition for Reed.
Yeah,
like Aaron Jones back to the Jets.
Let's go. Wait, because of Rodgers. God, please no. My Brees Hall bags are already pretty big. Let's go a little later. Let's talk the last rounds because there's 2 extra rounds in DraftKings.
Which I love. I love the 20 rounds for comfort, but everyone loves them.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of prefer them as well, but there's sort of like, I would say maybe 3 schools of thought here. One would be like, money under the mattress, take your 3rd quarterback, take your 3rd tight end, right? You could, it's like, let's not lose. Let's make sure we advance.
That's not me usually.
No, yeah. That's why I framed it that way.
Yeah.
No. The second would be, I'm gonna maybe take guys who I think have jobs. Like I want guys who are going to contribute to my roster. I'm trying to avoid dead roster spots. They're gonna be skill players, but I'm gonna go with guys like a Tutu Atwell or whatever, where I think like you're like on a deal where you're not getting cut. You have a clean path to seeing routes, and or you're a tight end, whatever it is, but you're going to have some kind of role in the offense. And I'm hoping you happen to kind of bank a really good week in one of the playoffs weeks. And I'm just trying to get as many live players on my roster as possible for that. And then the third would be, I'm trying to find leverage, and I want guys who the rest of the field isn't drafting. And I feel like that's what I've heard you talk the most about. But I'm kind of interested in bucket 2. I kind of like the idea of just trying to make sure all my roster spots are live.
Okay, but that's the Tutu Atwell is the same thesis as guys not being drafted. Like Tutu Atwell is not going in 100% of drafts.
Okay, well, all right. Maybe he was the best of both worlds.
That's the point of the guys who you're not taking guys who aren't drafted. Like you're not taking Antonio Brown. Like that's something I'm not doing. Like trying to predict Antonio Brown returning to the good graces of the NFL. I'm just taking like the handcuff running back, the field is not, or the tight end, the field is not, that's going to start. Some examples, K. Dotton. K. Dotton's going to be a starting tight end, showed something his rookie year, not being drafted, high leverage position. Boom, right there. Like, you're getting a guy the field's not drafting. Is it likely he's the piece you need? No, but Godwin could be traded. And there are a lot of guys like this, right? Jaylen Warren came out of nowhere last year, undrafted free agent, right? These are like August depth charts. And so it's a mix for me. It really depends. When I notice that there's 4 auto drafters and a bunch of teams have 4 QBs, maybe I do get that third quarterback where it's just like, I need points, right? Like, my team is so good, I just need points. Same with tight end. Sometimes we do some weirder roster constructions with the 20 rounds too, like 4 tight ends, a lot more viable, 4 late, especially if they're not being drafted. So there's a lot of like second round, third round, fourth round rookies from this year's draft class and last year's draft class who don't go drafted at all and are going to be on teams like Hassan Haskins. Could it be him instead of Tajay Spears? Absolutely. Could Derrick Henry be traded and it's now him and Spears? Absolutely. Like 4th round pick last year, whatever. So there's a lot of ways to go. I think a big mistake is just to like go off ADP and always draft that. But at the same time, the ADP is going to change. So whoever you're taking the 20th round right now by ADP, that guy could go undrafted come August. So
what are you going? So, I mean, Haskins is that's a pretty risky selection if you are just trying to avoid dead roster spots. So it does seem like you're willing to wade into that risky territory.
He's in the NFL. Like, I know Hassan Haskins is playing the NFL next year and not being on the street. That's what I know, right? Like, I feel good
about like a
about
Corey
that.
Davis, who's like a
Absolutely
solid. Okay, you're in on that.
In on that.
A Jarvis Landry who hasn't signed yet?
No. Don't feel like the ceiling's there. Like, always more likely to do this with a handcuff running back, right? Like, I had probably one of the only shares of Deion Jackson last year. Why? Because Jonathan Taylor's backup was not getting drafted. And I looked on the depth chart in August, and who was it? It was Deion Jackson. And, Deion Jackson actually spiked somewhat, like he had some weeks. And I was the only one who had him. So, yeah, the bet's thin, but you can get some major wins with these late round guys. If you hit on like the James Robinsons of the world when but he's not drafted by the field, it's like, damn, like you got a 15 to 20 point per game running back who just has like opportunity that's not getting drafted. Like, you could just like bull rush to the finals, like make it real easy to get there.
This is one area where I might start to think about the final size a little bit, where if I'm doing the $10, I think and this might be counterintuitive, but I think I'm less inclined to search for those guys because I'm like, because losing a roster spot hurts. I need to take down a 1,000 spot final, 1,400 team final. Not like getting something out of my 20th round pick, anything is massive. So maybe like I'm just going to try to hit like consecutive singles in those late rounds. Whereas if I don't need the 20th round pick so much because there's only 30 teams in the final or 10 teams in the final, then what I really want to hunt for is like a dude who is powering me to the final, powering me, to a very strong week, and then like lowering what I need from the rest of my team in that final week. And going for a bigger swing, going for a bigger swing when the final size decreases. Does that make sense?
It's hard to think through. It's hard to think through, and I won the 5-5-5 last year because I added Trey McBride, who largely going undrafted. I thought the upside was it's a team that utilizes the tight end in the Cardinals. Zach Ertz is old, so like if he gets hurt, this is a highly drafted guy. Like the upside case was there, and I think you should be searching for the upside case with these later round selections. On Underdog, it's like easy. It's like just stop taking the 18th round and 17th round guys and take the 19th and 20th round dudes. And because people just have to realize that the market just chooses who should be drafted and decides some spots are not worth it. And like I don't view it as like one is like way more thin. Like Chase Brown is thin, right? Like
He's very thin. Yeah.
So are like any handcuff that we don't know for a fact is the 2. Tajay Spears is thin, right? Like Tank Bigsby, I think is less thin. I feel comfortable he's the 2.
I don't think Spears is that thin, although
I think he's thinner. He's a lot thinner than Tank because they drafted a guy last year and the knee problem, obviously, but and the team is worse. But like
Tank can help him. He's a pass catcher.
Tank's competing with like, has-beens in the NFL, like guys who've never really done it before as the 2.
Right. I know. I agree. I think Tank is definitely safer. One thing I guess I should kind of back up and talk about is like, as I'm drafting in May, based on Leone's research and his Best Ball Manifesto, like one of the big negatives from drafting in May is that you're going to land on a bunch of dead roster spots. And those teams are not going to be very live or live at all to finish first in this tournament, in Best Ball Mania or whatever. So I want to try to avoid that. Now, I don't want to go crazy because one of the big advantages is that you're going to be able to hit on huge ADP values. But my thinking is like a lot of those ADP values are going to be guys who we know have jobs, but we didn't know how big their job was actually going to be. We're talking about like running backs drafted between rounds 8 and 12, or maybe a little later than that, but they're not like, I mean, certainly there will be huge ADP risers that are guys who are currently not being drafted or being drafted in the very last rounds. That will happen. But finding them while having already found a bunch of guys who you needed is going to be very difficult. And I don't know that I want to spend my bullets that way. Like, I kind of want to play it maybe a little safer. Like one thing I've done is I've made sure I get my 5th running back a little earlier, and then I'll take Quez Watkins, who I'm pairing with Jalen Hurts. Quez Watkins has a job, and he's on a really good offense.
Quez Watkins could be the 4th though. Like and like I think think about your 18th round guy is like you're looking for like 3 20-point weeks. Like I don't know. I saw on Twitter.
That's amazing.
That's amazing, but like that's 60 points over the course of the year, and assume every other week he's giving you 0, right? So I understand what you're saying. Where like with the uncertainty of these like handcuffs, maybe we lock down the guys we know have like roles in the NFL, and I do that somewhat too. But also, I'm okay gambling some of my entries, and I think like you and me both like to fall in love with like the flavor of the week at the end round, and like I think you should do that. Like so, like sometimes I'm taking Luke Schumacher, who it's like maybe he's the tight end in Dallas, right? Like huge upside if that's true, and not this Jake Ferguson guy. Or maybe sometimes I take Jake Ferguson. It's like I'm directly leveraging myself, but I know half those teams, whatever, I got 0 on them. The other half of the teams is like I got the starting tight end of the Cowboys, right? Like or and I'm okay just like trying to take names out of flavor that like just dudes that were drafted last year, like the Hassan Haskins of the NFL. Dontre Hilliard still in the NFL. He was the pass catching guy. He's a guy.
I don't think he is. I don't think he's signed.
I think he's still a tight end, but I'm not sure.
No, he's not.
But the point, he was a guy. Him and Tyler Conklin were like dudes I had like 100% on DraftKings last year because you could get them they were just like my 19th and 20th round guys. I thought they made sense. I thought they had upside. They were in an uncertain situation. And I mean, the Dontre Hilliard pick was real good until he got hurt, actually. Like he was like, and I was like, damn, I'm the only one who has this guy. So I don't know. But Quez Watkins is the same thing where it's like, it's just that wide receiver. And the Quez Watkins bet is not as much upside in theory, right? Like
it's not.
Quez Watkins is never giving us a 200-point season, but what you're really hunting for is just an individual spike week landing in the playoffs. And so it's different bets, right?
Exactly. And I guess what I'm thinking, like I have drafted a fair amount of Leonard Fournette. I've drafted Zeke, so like those guys could rise a lot in value depending on where they land.
I don't think they should, but they could. They could
They
rise a lot.
probably shouldn't. Yeah,
They're
but
they're like Julio from last
they're
year.
like
It's like,
Julio. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
They're exactly like Julio. But I think it's like probably a pretty reasonable bet that they will. There's also other running backs, in those kind of a little earlier that I think could rise a lot in value. And I'm trying to be on those guys, but I guess I'm like a little bit hesitant as we sit in May to think that I can have a high enough hit rate on does Dwayne McBride have value? He's one that's actually a little bit interesting to me because I'm like, we know Cook's like very likely to be traded. Dwayne McBride's a pretty interesting prospect.
He's
Now,
a guy
Ty
who
Chandler could screw that up,
100%
but
in August. Like he could be on 100% of August drafts. That would not surprise me at all. And he's on 0% of May drafts. And so yeah, he's still getting drafted, but those August drafts don't have the same overall team as you. So it's like getting ahead of that is a lot of value. Obviously, it's better
if I'm going to take Dwayne McBride, to me, like the perfect spot to do it would be that DK 555 because it's not that big of a final. So like if I burn a 20th round roster spot, so what? But it's also a super top heavy payout. So like if I get 25 points from Dwayne McBride and no one else has him, okay. But
the same thing works for Best Ball Mania 4. Like if Dwayne McBride, you have the sole Dwayne McBride team, which by the way, guys, like Underdog releases the count of players, and like I had one of 2 Jeff Driscoll teams last year. Like that felt good.
He was a tight end, right? He was a tight end
He was a tight end, and he got to play quarterback. And I was like, damn, I got Taysom Hill, but I'm the only one. He's with Travis Kelce. Like I was like, this could be
amazing.
$3 million. This could be $2 million. But there's no reason why Dwayne McBride can't be the sole. You have the sole share of him in the Best Ball Mania finals, and you're shipping $3 million.
But you only have 18 rounds, and there's no reason that you can't get there. But you have less bullets. I think it's a bigger final. You need probably like wasting one of those picks is a terrible thing to do.
You fighting this, I think, is a case for how strong because you know that the hit rate between 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 round players are similar. You also have spoken about how you view it through an auction lens. These are $1 picks.
These are $1 picks. Yeah.
Shouldn't your $1 picks be drafted by literally no one else in a 400,000 person? And you are still so anchored to ADP, and so is the market. Even myself, I don't for every pick. I don't do this. Sometimes I take Jerome Ford, who goes drafted in probably like 80% of drafts, right? But you don't want to do this, right? Like you don't want to eat that zero.
It's not. Well, I don't want to eat the zero.
It doesn't feel good, but it's not.
And the research has shown that it's not good to eat the zeros. You don't want it. That it really does hurt your team's odds of finishing first in like.
I don't think a dead 18th round. Like I don't agree that a dead 18th round pick hurts you because A, that's so dependent on the year. B,
I think a couple hurt you. I think if you had like one live pick out of like 14 to 18, I think that would really hurt you.
But we know it's the top 10 picks that really matters for any best ball draft, and you're just sprinkling in stuff here and there
to advance. But I think that there's usually guys in the final rounds that do hit, and you want to be on those guys. They matter.
It depends on the year, right? Like some year the market's just going to be better, and even if a guy hits, it's like you still always have the leverage out that the guy doesn't need to play until week 17. He could be a zero all year, and he could just be your $3 million hammer.
I agree with that.
And so I don't know. It's like I'm more willing to gamble on those late picks because I don't agree. If common sentiment is that we can't have any zeros on our team, I don't agree with that.
I don't think we can have any zeros. I'm just saying we're going to have some zeros because it's May. And so I'm just trying to to me, if I've got a Jalen Hurts team and I'm in drafting a Best Ball Mania team, I'm like, Quez Watkins just is kind of a no-brainer to me. Because I'm like,
what about
correlated.
Zacchaeus?
Is he going to take the job? Is that what you're saying? He's going to.
He's probably my favorite to be the 3 there.
All
Where
right.
it's
Well,
like,
then this is going to really hurt. I'm going to take a 0. I'm
well,
going to
that's
play
what I'm
it safe
saying.
and take a 0.
You feel like the Quez bet is different this year. Last year it was a great bet to me because it's like he is the 3. This year it's either him or Zacchaeus, and so now you're gambling on a spot that's like really not that worthy if you hit, unless AJ Brown or Devonta Smith and Goddard get hurt, and you don't know who it is, right? And it's like, and Zacchaeus has like done more in the NFL than Quez.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think Watkins, the fact that he's been there, but that's a great point. I mean, it is sort of one of the things that's tough to remember is that we're probably overconfident about like everything right now.
Everything.
Yeah.
Like Gabe Davis, it would not shock me. Like I'm drafting a lot of Gabe Davis, but it would really not shock me at all if like Justin Shorter was like, I don't know, just had the camp of his life and passed him on the depth chart. That shit happens in the NFL, right? Like, or if Kincaid is just like there's so many spots like that. There's spots like Jamar Chase, unquestionably, he's going to be the one. There's spots we feel real good about, but we are overconfident about a lot of things. And I don't know. It's an interesting topic to talk through.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me see if you're really committed to this idea.
Sure.
Drafting Ronald Jones?
I have not drafted a lot of Ronald Jones, but the
guy who's drafting everybody won't draft Ronald Jones.
I've drafted Deuce Vaughn. It's a bias thing for me where I have been burnt. Like last year, I had like the most Ronald Jones of everyone probably, and like everyone has their biases, and it's like, you know what? If I know Ronald's the 2, I'll come back to it later. I can get my exposure. But let's take the dude who like dad's on the team, and I don't know. I know he's small, and it's like, but like I don't think, but like seriously, I don't think the Cowboys RB2 is that great of a gamble because there are 3 dudes who it could be, right? And that's not
Malik
the case.
Davis, right?
That's not the case for every NFL team. Some teams, it's like, no, this is clearly the 2, or this is like, I don't want to like give away all my favorite guys, but like there's some teams where it's like the running back gets drafted highly, and I'm real confident who the 2 is. And I don't feel that way about the Cowboys.
Give us one more. Come on.
Zamir White is the guy. It's like, this dude is the 2, right? So if Josh Jacobs, a dude coming off of historical usage, gets hurt, Zamir White is like a 10.0 Raz guy.
Yeah.
And we know the team likes to use the bell cow. Yeah, I'm sure they have like Abdullah and co there.
Right. They've got to. It would devolve into a committee, but he would lead the early downs, I think.
And has the potential. Like if anyone's going to do what Jacobs did, it's him. The other guys can't do that. Could he just suck? Sure, but it's like, I don't know. I'll bet on the year 2. They didn't add anyone. Could they sign Fournette? This year is just different because of the presence of Fournette and Hunt and Zeke too on the market, I feel.
I agree. One reason I was drafting a ton of Jalen Warren and Chuba Hubbard and still am actually is that I think those guys are not only clear 2s, but are like protected by the backs in front of them. That's one thing to think about too. Like, are the Steelers signing Fournette, Hunt, or Zeke? No. Are the Panthers? No. So it's like not even just that they're clear 2s, but obviously those guys get drafted. But Jerome Ford, who you mentioned, is maybe like a not imaginative pick. I think he's actually a pretty good pick because he's in a similar situation.
But he could totally get hunted, most likely.
You think they'd bring Hunt back? I think they're done with him.
I think any team could bring a guy back. So like that, that's just like, I don't know. Bobby Wagner went back to the Seahawks. But fair. I think what you said was a great point where it's like Chuba is a guy I feel good enough is the 2 that I probably am not taking a gamble over him in many drafts if he's sitting there in the 20th, which he will sometimes. Like sometimes the guys fall for whatever reason. I'm like, is there news on Twitter? And it's just like, nope, he's just falling.
That happens more on DraftKings as well. The dudes just fall and fall
a lot because dudes are drafting like hometown guys or like dudes.
I think they have some weird ass ranks in there, is what it is. I honestly think that's what it is.
It was better this year to start.
I know you got to get out of here in a second, but let me ask you. I'm curious about the Patriots running back. Is that a Dallas one to you, or is that let's take some Kevin Terrace, let's take some Pierre Strong?
I'm just betting on Strong personally, but that's another spot I think is it's a worse gamble because the offense sucks, right? Like, so the potential
it did suck. They have an OC now.
But I still just think like Mac Jones could be one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. I could be wrong on that. He could be like a middling Kirk Cousins, but he gives me so low hope. And so does like their wideout core and their schedule so hard and their division so hard where it's like, if I had to choose a team to score like 10 points, which is just hard to score fantasy points if your team doesn't score touchdowns, it's like, it's that spot. Plus, they get the Bills in Week 17. That's probably a terrible matchup if the Bills are clicking. And so I do gamble on that spot because I like Ramondre a lot, but we're not thrilled on gambling on that offense. So it's like I would rather have – like the Raiders were a top 12 offense last year. They'll probably be like 16 or so. It's like that's the spot I'd probably rather gamble on, right? It's like why are we drafting 3 Saints running backs? You know? Like that's something the market's doing. It's like we're gonna draft Jamal and Kendrick Miller and Alvin Kamara. What other team are we drafting 3 running backs from consistently? Now we're doing that because 1 or 2 of those guys is gonna hit, but that just shows you that's just what the market's doing. Couple of those guys gotta suck, right? Like it can't all be roses for a team.
Well, there's a suspension coming, so we think okay, it's really 2 because it's Kendrick versus Jamal for those early weeks. Who you wanted. But the answer could be like none of these guys was that great. Although the Saints have used their running backs and they all get Taysomed, which is a real
but that's a serious like concern. Like Taysom is on like competing with these dudes for touchdowns, maybe.
Yeah. All right, we gotta wrap this up. This was fun. I'll see you in the DraftKings streets, Liam. Tell the people what you got going on.
Just Liam Murphy on YouTube. I do streams daily, but yeah, this was fun, Pat. I enjoyed talking about this with you. We'll definitely have to pick it back up another time because it's not like a solved discussion and like people are going to be listening to this and disagree. Some people this is going to be epiphany for like what the fuck these dudes talked about Hassan Haskins and Pierre Strong and like.
I wish we left more time for the 20th round discussion because
that's I think the most interesting part of what we agreed, and I think I like my gambles there, and this isn't like deep stuff. It's just people don't do a lot of work, and it's like simply pulling up an ESPN depth chart. And
I got one for you. This is a gross offense. Keyshawn Vaughn. Too gross or not gross enough?
On the Bucks?
On the Bucks, because Sean Tucker is kind of being treated as like the number 2. He's undrafted.
And Chase Edmonds. That's another one where it's like that's not the gamble I'd like. Like how about I mean, this is not rocket science, but here's what I do.
I don't do this, Liam. Maybe this is why I take Quez, so I don't have to.
Well, this is how I do it. Which running backs are going in the first and second round? And which of those running backs do we not draft the backups of? Those are good spots to gamble on, right? Yep. Saquon, Eckler, JT, right? Like these are all running backs first, second round that we're not drafting the backups of. And like 2 years ago, some of these backups were like 10th round picks. Like they were like Alexander Madison priced. But I don't know. So it's like the downside on Josh Kelly is big. It could be Spiller. That one's a little bit more muddled, right? But
I'd say they're all a little muddled. Eric Gray's kind of interesting in the Giants. Maybe that's not super.
I've drafted some Eric Gray. I've drafted some Hull. I draft a lot. And I don't love touting every super because you can't talk about every dude that's not going drafted because then they go drafted. But at the same time, it's hard for them to because like the Bengals, Travion Williams, like I don't know, Naheem Hines could maybe he was a trade deadline guy. Maybe he gets more in the offense this year. Anyways,
I knew you'd tout a bill eventually. we couldn't leave it without you touting a bill.
Thanks so much for having me, Pat. I'll see you in these streets. I gotta get going though.
All right. Thanks, Liam. We'll see you guys all later.
Peace, guys.